Afternoon, everybody. My name is Rose Power, and I am the project officer looking after the Interreg Europe Match-Up project. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. This is an opportunity to share with you this project and the impact it's had in the southern region, and also the impact it has on learning at EU, interregional and organisational level. So this project is a low carbon economy project. We've got 5 partners. The lead partner is the University of Bologna in Italy. We're representing Ireland, and we have partners from Germany, Portugal and Romania. And what we're seeking to do here is to foster low carbon, multimodal, sustainable transport in order to reduce pollution, CO2 emissions and traffic congestion. So how are we going to do this? We'll do this through the interregional exchange of experience, sharing our good practices, and the active support and participation of our regional stakeholders at these interregional events. And the ultimate aim is that we will produce a regional action plan which will hopefully improve policies in the southern region. And I'll deal with that later on in the project. Gus mentioned earlier the impact and the involvement of young people and broader aspects of our citizens. And hopefully this will be an opportunity to share with you some impacts that we've directly had. Over the course of the project, we've identified 6 good practices here in Ireland, and these good practices have been submitted to the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform, where they've been reviewed, validated by a thematic expert and published to be shared with all EU regions. And the first one there is the Limerick Smarter Travel Workplace Mobility Programme. And this involves looking at employers where there's over 250 employees and looking at putting in place sustainable transport commuting programmes within this. This featured at the European Interreg Europe Cycling Cities webinar, Getting More People to Cycle, in February 2021, which the Southern Regional Assembly co-hosted with Interreg Europe. The second one is Race Against Rob. And this good practice, which was published, was an event whereby we asked the public to join us to race against Rob Heffernan, who's a world champion walker. We had over 50 young people, pupils, who attended the event, and we had to actually close off the submissions after we reached 120 because we'd have to have closed off streets in Cork City. But we asked them to race using 2 different sustainable modes of transport. And in addition to that, we created a route which brought them over the Mary Elms Bridge, which was funded under the Regional Operational Programme, and to show them how easily, with the new changes and improvements in the infrastructure in Cork, that people can travel in a sustainable manner in the city. This good practice led to Cork City Council being the first local authority in Ireland to qualify for entry to European Mobility Awards in 2019. The next good practice that I'm going to share with you is the Green Schools Travel National Programme. And again, this good practice allows for student-led intervention at primary and secondary schools to create a system whereby they can have initiatives and infrastructural recommendations to allow them to travel to school in a sustainable manner. And this includes cycle infrastructure and walking infrastructure to provide them with the opportunity to travel independently to their schools. This featured again as well at the traffic calming measures at an Interreg Europe online discussion in March 2020, and it provided the inspiration for 3 interregional partners of the Match-Up project in the development of their regional action plans. And this was on the back of a Green Schools Pupil Committee providing a presentation to our interregional partners. The next good practice is Cork Transport Mobility Forum. This is a forum that has been created in Cork City, whereby all people who are interested or represent transport in the city come together and meet on a monthly basis. So this includes the local authority, it includes all transport providers, both private and public, it involves all environmental and cycling groups, and it gives them, and large employers and third level institutions, and it gives them an opportunity to come together, build relationships, build trust, so that they can come to the consensus on future developments for sustainable transport in the city. the Cork Transport Mobility Forum featured the Match-Up project at their Mix Your Moat annual conference in March 2020. The next good practice that was published was the Local Link Rural Transport Programme, which is a social inclusion rural transport programme that provides connectivity for our rural residents, and in addition to that provides an on-demand service for our residents who are either elderly or have mobility issues to ensure that they are connected. This provided an inspiration for the County of Northern Regional Action Plan. And the final good practice that I'd share with you is the cycle and ride infrastructure associated with the Luas Light Rail. And this is where the Luas went and interacted with all of their passengers before they embarked on an infrastructure programme to improve the cycle infrastructure in and around each of the Luas stations in order to ensure that they provided what their passenger needs and to increase substantially the amount of people who would cycle the first part of their journey and then take sustainable transport on the Luas into their either their school or their place of work. This was published by the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform as part of their policy brief on cycling cities in June 2020 and featured at the Interreg Europe Cycling Cities 2 Infrastructure Developments webinar in January 21. So that's a whistle-stop tour, but you can see from the project these are 6 really important initiatives that are happening here in Ireland, and not only did they benefit our local communities, but they're also benefiting our inter-regional partners who are taking inspiration from that for their regional action plans. And because they've been published on the Policy Learning Platform, they're providing an opportunity for people across Europe in other regions to take inspiration from this or in relation to improvements that they could make in their local area. So you'll see from that the amount of learning that took place as a direct result of our involvement in the Match-Up project. It happened at EU level with our good practices that we are sharing from Ireland, but also us being represented at EU policy briefs and at international events. We had interregional learning across all of our partners involved in the Match-Up project. And as I've mentioned, 3 of these interregional partners also took inspiration from these good practices for their regional action plan that they'll be implementing on the ground. We had a group of stakeholders who were actively involved in staff exchanges, in study visits, and in the participation on creating these good practices to be shared. And then across the organisation of the Southern Regional Assembly, it provided an opportunity for myself as an EU project officer to collaborate with regional planners in relation to our regional action plan, and also to collaborate with the regional operational programme officers in relation to policy improvements. A survey that we undertook as part of phase 1 of this project has shown that 10 of our stakeholders and 7 of the staff of the Southern Regional Assembly increased their professional competence as a result of participating in the Match-Up project. So I think that's very powerful and very useful to see how this one EU project can have such an impact on the ground for us going forward. So in relation to the actual outcome of the Match-Up project, we created a regional action plan. And we chose 2 policy instruments that we were going to try and improve. The first one is the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy, and in particular the regional policy objective of the 10-minute town and city concept, whereby we would create a framework to allow people to walk or to cycle for all essential services, including healthcare, education, social requirements, retail and leisure within a 10-minute walk or cycle, or where they would be able to access high quality public transport to connect to larger scale settlements for the delivery of these services. And the second policy improvement is in relation to the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programme that we're speaking about this morning, and in particular Priority 5, Sustainable Integrated Urban Development. So taking action to improve the urban environment, to revitalise cities and regenerate and decontaminate brownfield sites. And what we're trying to do here is to encourage the more sustainable transport in some of these projects. So I'll take you through the first action, which is the 10-minute town and city concept. And this forms part of an objective within our regional spatial and economic strategy. And what we've done is, inspired by the learnings in the Match-Up project from our interregional partners, we've developed a framework and methodology for a 10-minute town and city concept. While we had the concept within the policy instrument, the implementation of it wasn't set out. So it gave us an opportunity to try and create something that would assist our local authorities in mapping and assessing the key towns in their jurisdiction to see what changes would need to be incorporated, infrastructure or otherwise, in order to ensure that all their residents could access all of these services within a 10-minute walk, cycle or connection to public transport. And the hope is that they will then incorporate these into their local transport plans. The framework and methodology, which we developed in conjunction with our transport consultant, Arup, was presented to the elected members of the Assembly in September 2020. And we're currently at the moment developing an implementation plan for the rollout of the 10-minute town and city framework, whereby we'll roll it out to all of our local authorities. The plan is to, over the next month or two, to actually have a regional event whereby this would be rolled out to all of our local authorities. And then thereafter that we would create working groups within each of the local authorities to ensure that this concept is implemented and is worked into their local transport plans. And finally, we're also seeking that we will disseminate this at the International Transport Forum in May 2021, where we also will be hosting a virtual room. So this is a look at the 10-minute town concept, and I know we're caught for time here, so I don't really have a whole lot of time to go into it, but we can provide information after the event. But the 10-minute town is all about connecting communities, understanding how the communities work, how people travel within the communities to ensure that we can deliver an infrastructure that allows them to travel within 10 minutes by walking or cycling or by public transport to meet all of their essential needs and connection to retail, education, health and other services. So I won't go through the framework, but the framework document is available and we can make it available after today's event. The second action that we're looking at is a sustainable transport framework, and we're looking at this in conjunction with the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programme, Priority 5 6E, which is the designated urban centres grant scheme that Vinnie, my colleague, would have spoken about earlier. And what we're looking to do is to create a recommendation stage for the implementation process, whereby projects that are already approved but haven't commenced under this priority would be reviewed against the Sustainable Transport Framework. This is inspired by the interregional learning we got from our Match-Up project, and the framework is also developed with the assistance of Arup transport consultants. What this will do is it will facilitate, where possible, the incorporation of recommendations for low carbon urban mobility and modal interchange improvements into these projects, which are predominantly looking at public realm improvements. And the rationale for us implementing this new recommendation stage is to ensure that every opportunity is taken to increase non-private car travel by improving access to public transport, improving cycle infrastructure, increasing pedestrianisation priority areas, and improving modal interchange. As I said, all of these projects, or a lot of these projects, are already approved and the funding is committed. But this is an opportunity for us to look at this framework in conjunction with these projects with a view to seeing, where possible, if any of our recommendations can also be incorporated. This is a look at the framework, and I know it's very small here, but the framework looks at three main areas. The first one is low carbon urban mobility improvements. So this is looking at things like safe routes, secure biking, parking, cycle lanes, bike sharing. Modal interchange improvements is the second area, and this is looking at close proximity of services, connectivity between low carbon modes of transport, and wayfinding. And then the final area that we look at is improved accessibility. So looking at universal design to assist passengers with reduced mobility, pedestrianised areas, and access to pedestrian and cycle routes. As I mentioned earlier, all of the funding under this priority is already committed. But this is a means for us to create an improvement to those projects that have not yet commenced. An example of this is where we have used this framework already is for a project with Dublin City Council, where they are developing infrastructure around Wolftown Square, Liffey Street and Temple Bar Square. And while this policy improvement or enhancement is coming about towards the end of the programming period, the hope is that this initiative will be took forward into the next programming period so that it can continue to influence and improve our policy. So thank you very much for